What would you do if the only thing standing between you and death was a lioness? Would you run, freeze, or trust the impossible, that she remembers you? Comment below. Before you hear the story of a man, a lioness, and a roar that rewrote what we thought we knew about wild instincts and loyalty. The sky was still, too still. Pine Ridge Reserve simmered beneath the South African sun as Ethan Cross carried 2 buckets of raw meat across the dusty path toward the enclosures. It was a routine day, or so he thought. Out of nowhere, a blur of fur and fury exploded from the tree line. A feral mastiff, eyes wild, ribs jutting from starvation, launched at him with bone-snapping force. Ethan hit the ground hard. The wind left his lungs. Then the pain struck, searing, blinding. The dog's teeth tore into his forearm, locking like a steel trap. He thrashed, but the jaws only dug deeper. Gravel tore at his back. Blood poured. Panic surged. This was how it would end? Mauled to death just meters from his sanctuary? Vision fading, he tried to scream, but his voice cracked in his throat. Then, a roar. Not just sound, but thunder incarnate. It shook the pines, stopped the mastiff mid-snarl. From within her enclosure, Kira emerged, 420 pounds of muscle and memory. Her amber eyes burned with fury. She slammed against the steel barrier, snarling, fangs flashing, voice echoing across the savannah. The mastiff hesitated, then slowly, wisely, backed away. Ethan, still conscious, stared in disbelief. The lioness he once rescued as a dying cub was now guarding his life like it was her own. She didn't leap. She didn't kill. She stood between him and death because she remembered. 3 years before the roar that would save his life, Ethan Cross stood ankle-deep in a muddy construction lot on the outskirts of Durban. Rain pelted the ground. In the dim gray light, he spotted a motionless figure curled against a broken pallet. A lion cub, barely clinging to life. Her fur was matted with blood and mud. Her ribs jutted out like fragile scaffolding. One eye was swollen shut. She didn't flinch when Ethan knelt beside her. She didn't even move. The call had been anonymous. Someone tipped him off about an abandoned exotic pet dumped after getting too aggressive. What Ethan saw wasn't aggression. It was trauma, and he couldn't walk away. He wrapped her carefully in a blanket and whispered, "You're safe now." The next weeks blurred into sleepless nights. In a converted barn on his Pine Ridge Reserve, Ethan fed the cub by hand every 2 hours. He cleaned her wounds, monitored her vitals, and murmured soothing words through every fever and setback. He named her Kira, meaning sunbeam. Many said she wouldn't make it, but she did. As her strength returned, so did her spirit. She grew fast, powerful, graceful, intelligent, and through it all, one thing never changed: the way she looked at Ethan, not as prey, not as master, but as something deeper. He had saved her life, and deep in her wild heart, Kira never forgot. She was more than a lioness now. She was a promise in fur. Ethan lay in the dirt, his body writhing in agony, blood soaking the sleeve of his shirt, his strength slipping away like sand through trembling fingers. The mastiff snarled above him, jaws still dripping crimson, preparing for another bite. But before the beast could strike again, a roar shattered the air. A sound so loud, so primal, it seemed to come from the bones of the earth itself. Kira. She had watched from her enclosure. 420 pounds of silent strength turned sentinel. Now, she surged forward, hurling herself into the steel fencing with explosive force. Her golden mane rippled, her muscles tensed like drawn cables, and her amber eyes locked onto the threat with pure, ancestral rage. She didn't need to touch the mastiff. Her roar was enough. It froze the dog mid-growl. Her snarls rattled the ground. She was a flame behind the bars, alive, protective, immovable. The mastiff faltered, hackles raised, torn between defiance and instinct, and then, slowly, it backed away, step by step, until it vanished into the trees. Ethan could barely breathe, but he saw it all. Kira had not attacked. She had guarded. A lioness born in suffering, once nursed back from death by his hands, had made a choice in that moment, not to kill, but to remember mercy, to repay a debt the wild itself rarely honors. She didn't cross the line, but she stood at its edge and made her oath with a growl. Sirens pierced the still air as Ethan Cross was rushed into Pine Ridge Clinic, his shirt soaked in blood, his forearm torn open like paper. Nurses moved fast. IVs, gauze, adrenaline. But the pain wasn't what haunted him. It was the fear of what came next. Word of the attack had already reached the local wildlife authorities. When two uniformed officers stepped into the emergency bay, their questions were blunt, clinical. Did the lion leave its enclosure? Ethan's heart sank. Because in South Africa, if a Class A predator like a lion crosses containment, even to protect, it could be deemed a threat, and the consequences were fatal. Kira, the lioness who had stood between him and death, could now face euthanasia for doing what no human could, saving his life. I was inside the feeding zone. The dog broke in, not her out, Ethan insisted, his voice cracking. But the officers remained skeptical. Protocols had to be followed, reports filed, inspectors dispatched. As Ethan lay in the sterile room, arms stitched and bandaged, a different pain took hold, a deep, gnawing ache in his chest. Would the system punish the lioness for remembering mercy? Outside, the sun set behind the pines, and Kira waited, unaware that her loyalty had sparked a storm no claws could fight. 2 days after the attack, the real battle began, not with claws, but with truth. Wildlife officials arrived at Pine Ridge Reserve with one goal: determine whether the lioness had breached her enclosure. If she had, Kira would be classified as a public safety threat, and likely destroyed. Ethan, arm still in a sling, stood shakily before the monitor in the reserve's security office. His heart pounded. Everything depended on what the footage revealed. With trembling fingers, he cued the video. The screen flickered to life. Ethan, walking with buckets. The mastiff, digging furiously beneath the outer perimeter, slipping through. The ambush, the chaos, blood on the gravel. And then, Kira. There she was, still inside her enclosure, slamming against the reinforced fencing, snarling with fury. Her body language was clear. Protective, not predatory. She never left. Never crossed the boundary. The room was silent. Finally, one officer broke the stillness. She stayed in? Ethan nodded. She never left her post. The chief ranger leaned closer. Then this isn't a violation. Another investigator whispered, "It's a miracle." With the footage, everything changed. Kira's actions weren't seen as aggression. They were evidence of loyalty. And for the first time since the attack, Ethan exhaled. The footage went viral in less than 48 hours. 1 minute, Ethan Cross was a quiet wildlife rehabilitator with a wounded arm and a lioness by his side. The next, he was headline news across the globe. The Lioness Who Remembered dominated feeds from Johannesburg to London. Talk shows debated it. Wildlife forums lit up. A local journalist, Lindiwe Masiko, broke the story with a single line that echoed worldwide. A lion did not maul today. She remembered mercy. The footage of Kira snarling from behind her enclosure while Ethan bled on the ground stunned viewers. But what moved people most was not the danger, it was the restraint. Donations flooded in, more than $70,000 in the first week, for ethical wildlife sanctuaries. Ethan, reluctant at first, agreed to one live interview. Sitting beneath Kira's enclosure, he looked into the camera and said, "She's not a pet. She's not a guard. She's a lioness who remembered compassion." That moment struck a chord. He didn't sensationalize. He educated. Kira's story became a symbol, not of fear, but of loyalty, of wild memory, of second chances. And somewhere in the savannah, a lioness lay watching the stars, unaware that the world now whispered her name with awe. The evening air shimmered with the scent of dust and dusk. A week had passed since the attack, but Pine Ridge Reserve had not forgotten. Neither had Ethan. His arm, now wrapped in layers of gauze, throbbed with every heartbeat as he limped toward the edge of Kira's enclosure. She was there, sprawled atop her favorite sun-warmed boulder, bathed in the amber glow of twilight. Her eyes followed him, not with hunger or wild instinct, but with something deeper: recognition. He eased himself onto the observation bench just beyond the inner fence. No words were spoken. None were needed. Kira rose slowly, her massive form moving with the grace of royalty. She stepped closer to the barrier, pausing just inches from where Ethan sat. Then, she pressed her head gently against the mesh, an unspoken gesture of connection. Ethan's throat tightened. "You didn't have to protect me," he whispered, voice trembling. "But you did." The stars began to blink above them, one by one, and in that sacred silence between predator and man, past and present, injury and healing, something eternal passed between them. Not fear, not command, but trust. Because some bonds, once forged in mercy and blood, can never be broken. In the wild, survival is often measured in strength, speed, and instinct. But that day, as blood soaked the dust and a life hung by a thread, something far deeper emerged. Mercy returned. Kira, the lioness once broken and forgotten, had not just remembered Ethan's kindness. She had honored it with her silence, her restraint, her presence. She chose not to kill, but to protect, and in doing so, she proved that even in the fiercest hearts, love can take root and endure. Ethan's wounds would heal, but the memory of her amber eyes standing watch over him would never fade. The message was simple, but eternal. What we give in compassion, we often keep in loyalty. If this story moved you, please like the video, subscribe to our channel, and help us share more stories that reveal the hidden strength of love, in the wild and within us all.